Hello viewers, in my previous lecture on series that is Molecules of Life, I had discussed in brief 4 molecules of life that are carbohydrates, proteins, lipids and nucleic acids. Now I would like to discuss water as a biomolecule. But do you think it is justified to call water as a biomolecule? For this, let us study in depth the properties of water. And at the end of the lecture, let us conclude that is it right to call water as a biomolecule? We know that activity of all the molecules of life require a medium to act and interact. This medium must have all the required characteristics to allow the biochemical reactions without affecting the cellular environment. For this, water is the most important single compound which supports all living organisms on earth. How? We see that major structural component of cells and body fluids is water. Not only this, it is habitat to many plants, microbes and animals. It is the medium where the cellular, biomolecular, biochemical reactions can take place. Not only this, it maintains the molecular conformation and stable structure of biomolecules inside cytoplasm. Proteins and nucleic acids fold and attain their active 3D form in an aqueous medium. Transport medium in plants and animals is water. So in plants we see that xylem, that water transports water from xylem. It transports water from roots to various parts of the body, to various parts of the plant body. And from phloem, the food which is synthesized by leaves is transported to different parts of the plant. And in animals, it is the blood which transports oxygen to various parts of the body. So we find that water is important in transport medium, in transporting food, food and minerals from one part to the other part of a living organism, may it be plant or an animal. Now what we find that water ionizes to provide proton and hydroxyl ions to charge proteins, phospholipids and nucleic acids, and it also maintains specific pH ranges for proteins and enzymes to function. We know that enzymes are active at a specific pH, so it is water that maintains that specific pH. So we find that water is stabilizing with the help of H plus and OH ions. It is stabilizing proteins, phospholipids and nucleic acids, and it is also maintaining the pH for enzymes and proteins to function in a biological system. So that means it is acting as a solvent for various buffers in cell. Water, as you know, is also raw material in photosynthesis. We know in photosynthesis, carbon dioxide reacts with water in presence of chlorophyll in chloroplast to give us glucose, plus oxygen is liberated. So from where does this oxygen is liberated? It is the photolysis of water which evolves oxygen. And not only this, even when we are respiring, that when we use this oxygen to generate energy, what we find that this oxygen now breaks down glucose molecules during respiration, and there water is evolved, water is produced. And we've already discussed in the previous lecture that the hydrolysis reactions which are carried out in cells are brought about by water. That is, it is water which helps to break down, say, let us say, a peptide chain into simple amino acids. And it is the dehydration reactions, that is condensation reactions, which are involved in making polymers from different monomer units. For example, glucose molecules will react in such a way that the OH group of one molecule will react with the OH group of the second molecule of glucose, and in the process a glycosidic linkage is formed with elimination of water. So we see that water is involved everywhere in biological system. So now the question is, why is water so important? It is the properties of water that make it so important, and we can also consider it to be a biomolecule. And as you can see on your screens, the structure of water molecule, and what we find here, that in water oxygen is attached to two hydrogens. And now let us see what is the interaction between these molecules. We know, and now if we look at the molecular structure of water, what we find that electrons are, the distribution of electrons of a water molecule is uneven. That is, it is asymmetrical. That is, electrons are held more towards, they are distributed more towards oxygen. The reason being, oxygen is more electronegative than hydrogen, as a result of which oxygen will pull the electrons towards itself. So what we find, we can say that electrons spend more time near the oxygen and less time near hydrogen. So as a result of which, what happens is that electrons move towards oxygen, that is, they move away from hydrogen atoms. Therefore we say that the hydrogen end has a slightly positive charge and oxygen atom has a slight negative charge. As you can see on your screens here, that oxygen has attracted the electrons toward itself because of its high electronegativity, as a result of which oxygen has a slight negative charge and the positive charge is over the hydrogen atoms. So that means this molecule, now water, is polar in nature. Now since it is polar in nature, it interacts with other molecules which are necessary for life. And we know most of the substances in cell are floating around in water-based cytoplasmic environment. So what happens now, since the water molecule is polar in nature, water molecules can thus be oriented towards both positive and negative ions. Therefore, they behave as dipoles. And we say, since water is polar, why is water polar in nature? Because it has slightly charged regions. Whereas if we talk of a non-polar molecule like water, like hydrogen or oxygen, these molecules are non-polar because there is no distribution of charges. So what you can see in this slide, that oxygen has a slight negative charge on it and hydrogen has a slight positive charge on it, and it will now behave as a dipole. So the hydrogen bond, now when we talk of an hydrogen bond, so because it is behaving like a dipole, what we find that water is capable of forming hydrogen bond. Now before discussing how water forms hydrogen bond, let us discuss what is hydrogen bond. Hydrogen bond is unequal electron sharing, results as an electrostatic interaction between a hydrogen atom attached covalently to an oxygen atom with the electrons of a second electronegative atom of oxygen, to which it does not have any direct covalent bonding. So this is called hydrogen bonding. So as I've shown on your screens in simple language, what we find that this oxygen is attached to two hydrogens, and there we have another molecule of water. And what we find that this hydrogen makes hydrogen which is attached to an electronegative oxygen makes a bond with the second atom of oxygen, and this bond is known as hydrogen bond. So we can say hydrogen bond forms between slightly positive hydrogen atoms and slightly negative oxygen atoms. And what we find in this case that each water molecule makes hydrogen bonding with neighboring 4 molecules of water. So, and this hydrogen bonding here is known as intermolecular hydrogen bonding, that is, it is between 2 water molecules. And when we discuss the properties of water, that the hydrogen bond is very vital for the different properties of water. That is, we say that water has a special position. That is, so now let me say what is a hydrogen bond. So we can say a hydrogen bond is an attraction between 2 atoms that already participate in other chemical bonds. As you can see here, that here it is an interaction between 2 atoms, and these atoms are already involved in other linkages, in other bonds. That is, this oxygen is bonded to hydrogen here, and in hydrogen here in a water molecule, and now hydrogen is binding these 2 oxygens through a hydrogen bond. And when we talk of a hydrogen bond, then we know that the strength ranges from 4 kilojoules to 50 kilojoules per mole of a hydrogen bonds. And these hydrogen bonds were first described by Latimer and Rodebush in 1920. These hydrogen bonds, as I said, can be of varying strength. That is the strength may be 4 kilojoules to 50 kilojoules. So we can say that the strength of the hydrogen bonds is varying, it is different. So we can now have strong hydrogen bonds and weak hydrogen bonds. So when do we have a strong hydrogen bond in a molecule, and when do we have a weak hydrogen bond in molecule? When hydrogen bonds are strongest, when oxygen, hydrogen and oxygen are in a straight line. This is the ideal geometry for a strong hydrogen bond to be formed. But this ideal geometry is not possible in, say, proteins, where the hydrogen bonded moieties are constrained. That is, they may be bent. So as a result, bond is weaker. So as you can see, I have shown here a water molecule, and what we find that these here, that oxygen, this is here, the molecule is what? It is linear. So what we find that here the oxygen, hydrogen and oxygen are in the straight line. So oxygen, what we have here, hydrogen and hydrogen here, they are in straight line, and since they are straight line, here the hydrogen bond will be strong. That is, the hydrogen bond between 2 water molecules will be strong. And similarly, we find that the hydrogen bond between, say, a water molecule, between an alcohol and a phosphate group, say in triglycerides, will also be strong, because their oxygen, hydrogen and oxygen are linear. But if this arrangement was not linear, it was bent, then in this case the hydrogen bond will be weak. So for a strong hydrogen bond to be formed, the hydrogen, oxygen and hydrogen must be linear, or we can say if the bond is between, say, NH2 and OH group, that is between an amino group and water, then in that case we say that nitrogen, hydrogen and oxygen must be linear. So as I've said that hydrogen bonds play a very vital role in discussing the properties of water. So we say hydrogen is responsible for 4 hydrogen bonds are important for 4 important properties of water. That is, water can act as a universal solvent. Then water has high specific heat. Water shows surface tension. And then what we find, that water, in spite of being liquid, is less dense as that. Why is water less dense when it is in a solid state, whereas it should have been denser than liquid when water exists in liquid state? You know that water can exist in three forms: liquid, solid, that is solid, liquid and gas. And liquid state in case of water is more dense as compared to its solid state. So now let us look into the structures where we find hydrogen bonds in biological systems. So in this case, what we find, that normally when we talk of an hydrogen bond, we talk of an acceptor and a donor. So we can say, when we are talking of a bond here, that is between a carbonyl group and a hydroxyl group, that is of a water molecule. In case of carbohydrates, so we can say in this case, one molecule, that one atom of oxygen is a donor, and that is hydrogen is acceptor is usually. So we can say one of the atoms here is acting as an acceptor and one is acting as a donor. So here we have, I've shown a hydrogen bond as it may exist in heterocyclic bases. And then again here we have a hydrogen bond between a ether linkage and say a water molecule, which may be present in carbohydrates. And then we again here we have shown hydrogen bonding, say maybe between the oxygen of the carbonyl group and amino group of say a protein, resulting in a form of which is found in peptide bonds. And then again we have a linkage between a oxygen and a nitrogen. Here there is a hydrogen bond, and then of course here's another hydrogen bond between an imide and a nitrogen. And both the cases here are nitrogen, which is an imide here, which may be present in a heterocyclic molecule, that is the bases which are present in nucleic acids, and we have amino acid here, which could be adenine. When we talk of hydrogen bonds, they can also, that means now hydrogen bonds can also form with a single large organic molecule. So once I like to go back here, so when we are talking of hydrogen bonds here, so what we find, that hydrogen bonds, when I talk here, they can be, these hydrogen bonds here, they can be between the complementary bases. So now hydrogen bonds can also form a single large organic molecule. That means what I am trying to tell you here is that hydrogen bonds can be formed between different parts of a protein molecule and bend the molecule into a distinctive shape, which is important for the function of proteins. Not only this, as I have discussed in my previous slides, that hydrogen bonds also hold together two nucleotide chains of DNA molecules. And what we find, that here we have hydrogen bonds between complementary bases of DNA, that is between the thymine and the adenine. And these bonds I have already explained in my previous slides, that here we have a possibility of hydrogen bonding here, and these hydrogen bonds are formed between the complementary bases of DNA. Not only this, hydrogen bonds also explain why water's boiling point is 100 degrees, and this is higher than the boiling points of similar substances without hydrogen bonds. If we look into the hydrides of this group, the boiling point of water should have been minus 100 degrees. But it is because of hydrogen bonding that the boiling point of water is 100 degrees Celsius. And because the boiling point of water is so high, most of the water exists in liquid state on earth, and you know that 75% of the earth is covered by water. And we know, now you can understand that why is water so important. This liquid water, water is needed by all living organisms. Therefore, the availability of liquid water enables life to survive over much of the planet. No wonder 75% of our planet is water. So now, what are the life providing properties of water? The unique properties of water are due to hydrogen bonds. So we say hydrogen bonds are central. Why are they central? Because hydrogen bonds in liquid water are central to water's life providing properties. That it is the hydrogen bonds which will keep water in liquid state, and we know most of the life will exist in water. So because of its extensive hydrogen bonding, water is liquid over a far greater range of temperatures that would be expected for a molecule of its size. If it was not for hydrogen bonding, water would not have existed as liquid. And we know that molecules of water are constantly moving in relation to each other, and the hydrogen bonds are continuously breaking and reforming. Imagine at a time scale faster than 200 femtoseconds, that is 2 to the power of 10 minus 13 seconds. So that means hydrogen bonds, when they are forming so quickly, that is, a hydrogen bond is formed in 200 femtoseconds, it is formed and it is broken. Therefore, we do not understand the importance. That means we do not comprehend that there is a hydrogen bond, and it is because of, and therefore, and we say that these hydrogen bonds are strong enough, although they are breaking and forming so quickly, these hydrogen bonds are strong enough to create many of the peculiar properties of water, some of which make it integral to life. So when we are talking of a hydrogen bond, we see that a single hydrogen bond is weak, but the sheer number makes it a strong force. So now we can use water as a universal solvent. Why does water act as a universal solvent? We know water is a polar molecule and has exceptionally high hydrogen bonding ability. This unique property allows it to dissolve a variety of molecules like sugars, amino acids, carrier proteins in solution. And what we find that, as I've already said, I've already shown that there is hydrogen bond is between the hydroxyl group of we can say of a carbohydrate and a water molecule. Then it can be between the carbonyl group of a carbohydrate or a amide and a water molecule, and as I have shown here, and that is here it is between the amido group and the between here we have hydrogen bond between the two peptide chains also. They are bonded. So now we see that the sugars and proteins which are containing OH or NH2 groups therefore dissolve easily in water. As you can see here that sugars can form hydrogen bonding here with water. Here the carbonyl group of a sugar molecule is forming a hydrogen bond. Then what we find that proteins also can form hydrogen bonds because proteins have amino groups, and because of these polar groups, that is OH in sugars and amino group in proteins, these molecules are equally soluble in water, easily soluble in water, they dissolve in water. Therefore, we say that an aqueous medium would be highly suitable for uptake of dissolved mineral nutrients. So we say that so it is very vital, water is very vital for growth and development of plants, and it is also very important for animals. So what happens now? How does it act as a solvent? What we find that if we talk of a normal ionic compound, say NaCl, so what we find that ionic compounds disperse as ions in water and get evenly distributed. An aqueous solution is formed when one substance dissolves in another. That means when say I can say NaCl dissolves in water, so we call it as an aqueous solution, and this solution is a homogeneous mixture, as you can see here, that is solvent as water and solute say as NaCl molecule, which will be soluble in this water. How does this happen? So what happens is water dissolves many crystal salts by hydrating their compound ions. So what happens is when we are talking of NaCl, water clusters around the ions Na, sodium and chloride, and the crystal lattice of NaCl is disturbed. And now what we find that the ionic charges are partially neutralized on these ions, and the electrostatic attractions between them are weakened and the lattice structure is destroyed. This is what you can see on your screens, that when we have a molecule, a crystal of NaCl, the water molecule will surround the Na molecules, Na ions, sodium ions by its oxygen, and the chloride ions will be stabilized through hydrogen bonding. They are hydrated as chlorides. So what we find that because of water, the electrostatic forces between Na and Cl are weakened and this crystal lattice breaks. And what happens when this crystal lattice breaks? There is greater freedom of movement, and when there is greater freedom of movement, that means the randomness is increasing, or in other words, the entropy of the system is increasing, and more NaCl gets dissolved in water. Now the last the last example where I would like to discuss the importance of water is the enzyme substrate interaction. So when does an enzyme substrate interaction occur? What happens is when an enzyme substrate complex is formed, it is due to the increase in entropy. We know that when both the enzymes and the substrate are existing separately, they will force the neighboring water molecules into an ordered shell. So what we find here, they are in ordered shell. Now as you can see on your screens, that when this substrate comes, when the enzyme comes near to the substrate, the sum of the ordered water gets released. You can see that the water here is getting released, and when the water is getting released here, the entropy or the randomness of the system increases, and this gives a thermodynamic push for the formation of enzyme substrate complex. So what we find that water is playing a very pivotal role. It is playing pivotal role as to in the transport of minerals, transport of blood, in the transport system in animals and plants. It is acting as a solvent. It is helping to bring about the reaction between a substrate and an enzyme. It is stabilizing the DNA, RNA, or carbohydrate molecules. It is also important in lipids. So we can say that we can rightly call water as a biomolecule. So along with carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, we can also call water, which is an inorganic molecule, as a biomolecule. As you've already seen, it plays a pivotal role and it is essential for existence of life on this planet. Thank you.